This might look like a slightly funny CX-5, but that's because it's not. This is Mazda's new CX-60, and between this and the new CX-80, this is what Mazda says signals its new upmarket future. And so over the next 24 hours, we're going to drive from here in KL to Ipoh and back to put this car through its paces. Let's go. Now, having driven this car from KL to Ipoh, we've got a rough idea of what this car is about, but first, the basics. Under the bonnet, you'll find a 2.5-litre naturally aspirated Skyactiv G engine, producing 189 horsepower and about 260 Newton meters of torque, with that power going to the rear wheels via an 8-speed automatic gearbox. This is Mazda's first rear-wheel drive SUV, part of their move towards a slightly more upmarket, slightly more premium product portfolio, and this is built on a platform that supports it. Now, that 2.5-litre NA engine represents the smallest engine currently available for the CX-60 globally, because in addition to this, you can also get a 2.5 NA plug-in hybrid, and that is what powers the CX-80. You can also get a 3.3-litre inline-6 turbocharged petrol engine and a 3.3-litre inline-6 turbocharged diesel, but there's slim chance of that making it here. Now, in terms of the overall design, as you can see, the Mazda CX-60 and CX-80 wear a very distinctive face compared to its other brethren. For example, you now get much smaller headlights replete with matrix LEDs. You get a very different LED daytime running light signature and a much larger, much more prominent thatched grille. Down here, you don't get fog lights at all. Instead, there is a little bit of aerodynamic trickery in order to help smooth the air over the front wheels, which helps to improve aerodynamics and therefore reduce wind resistance. And overall, I do think the front end of this car certainly looks a lot more imposing. Now, in terms of rolling stock, this car runs on 20-inch alloy wheels wrapped in Goodyear Efficient Grip SUV tires, which are suitable for this kind of car, but more importantly also reduce rolling resistance, which therefore improves efficiency. Now, here you will find a fake vent. Now, on the inline-6 models, it will actually say inline-6 here. On the CX-80, which is a plug-in hybrid, it'll say PHEV, but here it's just unpainted, unvarnished black plastic. Not great, given the fact this car is meant to be a premium proposition, like that could have at least been gloss. But the biggest change is when you look at this car from the side. Because the CX-60 and the CX-80 ride on that new rear-wheel drive focused platform and longitudinal layout engines, that's part of the reason why the proportions of the CX-60 are notably very different from other Mazda SUVs currently in the lineup. For example, there is a much more cabin rearward design here with a much longer bonnet and therefore a longer dash-to-axle ratio. And as a result, it does make this car look a lot more elegant, a lot more poised, and again, suitably upmarket given its more upmarket positioning. One thing that I do find quite odd down the side of the CX-60 is that there is no chrome at all. This is very different, again, from what we've seen from other Mazdas, including cars as far down in the lineup as the CX-30, because even that has some chrome trim. This car has none at all, but I suppose if you're looking for that darker look, and that fits. Now, one way to tell the CX-60 and CX-80 apart, aside from the dimensions, is actually the window line, because on the 60 it actually cuts back this way, whereas on the CX-80 it curves further down here in order to maximize rear headroom. But overall, as you can see, this to me is where you can tell that there is something a little bit different with this Mazda SUV. The back end of the CX-60 also is what demarcates this as the larger, more premium offering, because the taillights, as you can see, are a two-piece design that stretch into the center of the boot, which is also shared with the CX-80. And of course, you can see that the bodywork here is a little bit more sculpted in order to reduce the monotony of this back end. There are fake exhaust exits here, however, which I think are ridiculous, because on the CX-80, somehow they've managed to remove them. And as far as I'm concerned, even though this car has dual exit exhaust, why don't you just pop them through the bumper? Now, because the CX-60 is a 5-seater compared to the CX-80's 6 or 7-seater, the boot space in this car is absolutely cavernous. This is certainly larger than what you get from a CX-5, and therefore also puts it in better stead against vehicles like the Honda CR-V as well as other vehicles within that space. Although compared to vehicles like the Jayco J8 and a Moda C9, this is broadly similar. However, there is a little bit more verticality here compared to the Chinese cars, so that's good. On top of that, the rear seats tumble 40-20-40 for maximum practicality and versatility, and you do get some tie-down hooks, a 12-volt socket, as well as a small netted area in order to hold smaller items to stop them from rattling about. But overall, this car does seem decently practical for what it is. Now, in terms of the interior, the CX-60 is pretty much alright. Despite Burmaz's claims that this is meant to be a more upmarket model, in terms of the interior material quality, it seems to parrot what we've seen from the CX-8, which means that you get plenty of soft touch materials about the place. Everywhere that you touch, the general touch points are quite forgiving, but the quality of the materials themselves could be a bit better for a car that is, again, knocking on 200,000 ringgit, and more importantly, has vehicles from brands like BMW and Mercedes-Benz in its sights. Now, it's not to say that this is a bad interior, far from it. The interior architecture, for example, is a typically Mazda affair, but it's got a little bit more flair than we've seen from the brand before. There is an interesting use of different colored materials and textures within the cabin that certainly make it look interesting. And for the most part, what you touch and feel feels high quality. So this is all fine. I appreciate the fact that they've maintained tactile touch points like physical controls for the HVAC system, physical controls for the steering wheel, because God knows how much I hate touchpads on steering wheels. Because of that, you can tell that even as Mazda tries to move to this new generation product with things like the digital instrument cluster and the full color heads-up display, they're still keeping an eye on what makes Mazdas likable. The fact that the driving experience and the interior architecture is designed to fit the needs of the driver first. And so I think that is quite impressive. Now, out on the motorway, again, just to recap, there is a 2.5 litre naturally aspirated Skyactiv G engine in the front, an engine that we're quite familiar with, having seen it before in the Mazda 6, the Mazda CX-8 and the CX-5. But of course, here, instead of being a transverse mount where it sits across the front axle, now it's longitudinally mounted with the power going to the rear wheels rather than the front. This is part of Mazda's new, updated, more upmarket, large platform architecture, where it prioritizes rear-wheel drive or all-wheel drive. That's it. There are no front-wheel drive cars, or at least they don't plan to make any front-wheel drive cars on this platform. Now, the 2.5 litre NA engine choice for this car is interesting because, as far as I can tell, there are no other markets internationally that get this powertrain setup. Because normally, this 2.5 litre NA engine is paired with a plug-in hybrid system, for example, like what you get from the CX-80. But here, there is no electrification, it's just that engine. Now, I bring this up because I have sung praises of this engine in the past. When it's used in vehicles like the Mazda 6 and the Mazda CX-5, and to some extent the CX-8, this engine feels adequate. In the smaller cars, it feels positively sprightly and it negates the need for a turbocharger. And in the CX-8, it does an okay enough job, more than enough for what you need. But in this car, given the fact that the CX-60 is heavier than even the CX-8, this engine is working quite hard to keep the car going. Mercifully, thanks to the 8-speed automatic gearbox, it does do a decent job at trying to keep the car in the torque band. But you can tell that this engine is working hard to maintain motorway speeds. I'm cruising now with the adaptive cruise control on, which works brilliantly, mind. But you can tell that, again, a little bit more torque would have gone a long way in this experience. Now, in terms of the overall refinement, I think road noise is pretty well managed, at least up to motorway speeds. Wind noise is slightly more pronounced once the speeds pick up. But again, I think that this is par for the course and perhaps maybe slightly better than other large SUVs within this space. I think vehicles like the Amoda C9 and the Jayco J8 are not quite as quiet as this once the speed starts to pick up. Additionally, there is also the matter of this car's advanced driver assist features. Now, Chinese car makers like to tout that there are 350,000 different safety systems keeping you safe, but ultimately you can have a billion systems, but if they're calibrated badly, you're just not going to use them. In a Mazda, however, as we've said in the past, their ADAS systems tend to be very well calibrated. They're not jumpy or nervous, and they don't make you anxious. These are systems that you can reliably use on a regular basis, and it is no different in the CX-60. Which means things like the adaptive cruise control with traffic jam assist is excellent. The lane centering is not overly aggressive. It doesn't scream at you if you stray too close to a line. It allows for a certain degree of forgiveness, as it were, as you move around other vehicles, like when you're trying to navigate around bikes and stuff like that. And so overall, I think this is a relatively positive experience. One thing that I would note is the fact that this car comes as standard with matrix LED headlights, and it seems that this car's system is about as aggressive as I've seen from, for example, the Volkswagen Touareg. So this is all very positive. And of course, the fact that you have a full color heads-up display, which not only gives you directional information, but also things like your blind spot information, etc. All of that just feels positive. As far as I'm concerned, being sat behind the wheel, it just feels like this is a very well-engineered and very well-considered vehicle. Now, of course, as far as I can tell from this very brief drive, there are a couple of things in here that are slightly less than ideal. Firstly, this car does come with a Bose audio system, which sounds great on paper, but doesn't sound great in the car because it's not as punchy or as enveloping as I would like from a vehicle like this. I would have appreciated something with a little bit more sense of immersion, if that makes sense to you. And secondly, I would have loved to have seen some sort of forced induction on this car, or failing which, at the very least, a mild hybrid system to just provide a little bit more twist when you need it. Because admittedly, when speeds pick up, or in fact when you're setting off from a standstill, if you do so with any degree of urgency, you will feel that this engine is struggling under the weight of the car. Now, of course, Burmaz has said that the reason why this particular car has been specified the way it has is to meet that 200,000 ringgit price point. And I think that given that they had a specific price point in mind, they've done an admirable job at speccing this car up. However, they have also left the door open to potentially other variants with better powertrains, perhaps with a little bit more power, a little bit more torque, that would feed into this premium driving experience a little bit better, in my opinion. And so I am hopeful that if the reception for this car is positive, which they say is decently, then we should be able to expect hopefully the inline sixes or an electrified powertrain for this car in the near future. But that is entirely dependent on how this car, the debut variant, does first. So after having driven this car from KL to Ipoh and back, I can say that Mazda's claim of a more upmarket, more premium experience certainly doesn't seem to be a hollow promise. Now, the new Mazda CX-60 will retail from a little bit over 200,000 ringgit, including a 5-year warranty and 5-year service package, meaning that this is essentially buy and drive during that period. On top of that, Mazda says that being a responsible brand means that you take care of your customers even beyond point of sale, which means that there will be no funny business, no weird discounts, nothing. So you can buy a car like this and be confident in its resale value and continued appeal. In any case, that concludes our media preview drive of the new Mazda CX-60. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell icon so you're notified every time we make a new upload. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, and you can join our new WhatsApp channel. All the links are in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one. Take care and stay safe.